1834 in Newark, New Jersey. After leaving Howard University in the Air Force, he moved to the Lower East Side of Manhattan in 1957 and co-edited the avant-garde literary magazine, Union, and founded Totem Press, which first published works by Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, and others. He published his first volume of poetry, prefaced to a 20-volume suicide note, in 1961. His Blues People, Negro Music and White America is still regarded as a seminal work on Afro-American music and culture. In 1965, Jones moved to Harlem, where he founded the Black Arts Repertory Theater School. Amiri and his wife, Amina, edited The Music Meditation of Jazz and Blues Model and Confirmation, an anthology of African-American women, which won an American Book Award from the Before Purpose Foundation. Amiri and his wife founded Kamako's Blues People, a multimedia art space from a small theater in their Newark home. Baraka is the poet laureate of the Newark Public Schools, appointed by former Superintendent Marion Bolden. The Before Columbus Foundation recently announced that Digging the Afro-American Soul of American Classical Music by Amiri Baraka was selected as a winner of the 31st Annual American Book Awards for 2010. I present to you Mr. Amiri Baraka.
Thank you very much. It's difficult to tell the history of Black Newark in 15 minutes, but I'm going to try. I was born here, like the lady says, 1934. My people came here in 1924. My mother from Dothan, Alabama. My father from Hartsville, South Carolina. So I was the first one born up here in the North. Newark was founded in 1666 by a group of breakaway group from the Church of England who used to be called Puritans. We used to call them that derisively. The city itself was on land purchased by a man named Robert Treat of the New Haven colony, but he got overthrown in a power struggle linked to England because they sheltered the judges who fled here after they had sentenced the English king, Charles I, to death. They sentenced him to death, and the people reversed it. They had to split, and they came over here. They joined with the popular forces of the English Parliament against Charles's attempt to be an absolute monarch. Newark is the third oldest city in the United States. Boston is number 1. New York is number 2. Newark is the third oldest city in the United States. We've been here a long time. Robert Treat purchased this land on the Passaic from the Hackensack Indians. That's where that name Hackensack comes from. What do you have to give them? Gunpowder, 100 bars of lead, 20 axes, 20 coats, guns, pistols, swords, kettles, blankets, knives, and some beer, and 10 pairs of pants. Slavery began in New Jersey around the same time, shortly after the Dutch settled. You know, the Dutch used to call that New Amsterdam rather than New York. You know, it was New Amsterdam, it was by the Dutch. The Dutch brought 11 African slaves with them and came there. They worked as farmers, fur traders, builders of that city. When the English took over the colony, they continued the slave trade. In 1726, there were 2,500 blacks in New Jersey out of 32,000 people. By 1790, the enslaved population was 14,000. It had jumped that quick, 14,000 black people. 1790, the census record says 11,423 slaves, 6% of the population. In 1694, the colony ruled that any white man might hold the Negro till the owner comes. So you could be walking down the street and they could put their hand on you. I think some of them think they're still in that period. They wanted to call the city Milford after the city they'd come out of in Massachusetts, but an early person with some influence said should be called New Ark. The real name of the town is New Ark, like the old Ark. This is supposed to be the new Ark, supposed to be carrying into a new future. The state has had a long tolerance for slavery. as well as a strong colonization organization. Once they got us over here, they didn't want to send us back to Africa. But the black cry was, it's too late, you should have left us where you found us. So by the 19th century, it was not Africans they wanted to send back, but Afro-Americans. There was a preacher named Samuel Cornish, who was on Plain Street. That's now, University Avenue, Plain Street. There was a church down there, Presbyterian Church. He wrote in 1839 to a man named Frederick Frelinghuysen. That's the same street. So remember, every time you drive down Frelinghuysen, that you roll over Mr. Frelinghuysen. He wanted to send us back to Africa. Cornish, who was a member of the Essex County Anti-Slavery Society back in the 19th century. So it wasn't always just running around singing and hauling cotton. We were fighting for our liberation even then. But there were slaves even in Newark. In fact, I've read some of those documents of slaves being sold in Newark, slaves running away in Newark and brought back to Newark. Most of the free blacks were in the southern part of the state because of the Quakers, who freed a lot of the blacks. So people like, places like Burlington and Camden is where most of the free blacks were. The freed blacks, freed slaves began to build their own cities by the end of the 18th century. There is black cities in this state. There's about 5 or 6 all-black cities built by slaves in this state. One of them was called Timbuktu, after the place in West Africa in Mali, where the first university in the world was built. Some of these were stations for the Underground Railroad, one in Fairfield Township, one called Snow Hill, which was changed to Freehaven, then the Lawnside. There was one called Whitetown. I guess they was laying on symbol, trying to trick people. There was an all-black city named Whitetown down there near Cape May, where the residents had come from North Carolina. There was a city called Guineatown, one called Sadlertown near Camden. The other one was called Skunk Hollow, which is in Bergen County. But by then, there was a militant cause for abolition. The slaves over here never were quiet about it. They always kept saying, we must be free. Y'all call yourself Christians and you got us as slaves. So how can you be a Christian and you got us as slaves? They would harass it. They know it would signify. But what these people would say is abolition is unconstitutional confiscation of property. In other words, we were property, we're not human beings. And that's what Du Bois said is black people tend to be submissive because they want to see themselves through the eyes of people that hate them. You have to learn not to look at yourself through the eyes of people that hate you. That's called the double consciousness. It's called that. You, but you hate you, or somebody else hates you, and you see yourself through their eyes. Yeah, you got to watch out for that. But the Trenton Times, and this is a newspaper that still exists, in 1863 said, Afro-Americans are to be feared. They are by nature treacherous, worthless, imbecile, and there are already too many of them in the state. That's the Trenton Times. So don't never buy that paper. They said that. But in 1804, they voted for gradual abolition, that we were going to be, liberated gradually. But we'd already built a school here in Newark. The same Reverend Cornish built a school here, even while there were blacks running away from slavery in Newark. But still, Newark already had an anti-slavery society, and we had a black newspaper called Freedom's Journal, which was the first black newspaper in the United States, called Freedom's Journal in Newark from Plain Street. So the people wasn't fooling around. There was 2 black men, one named Russ Worm and the other Samuel Cornish, who had worked for the African free schools in New York. And then we came to Newark and later built a newspaper called The Colored American. Not only did we have an anti-slave side even before the Civil War, but a political party called the Free Soil Party, which had black and white members. The party's slogan was free soil, free speech, free labor, free men. That was in 1850. Newark also had a terrible record as far as supporting. They supported slavery, and Lincoln lost twice here in Newark. Both elections, Newark lost. Newark voted against Lincoln twice. So you see the city you in and what you had to face to get up off your knees. I could go on and on about the old Newark. After the Civil War, the community grew. It was about 7,000 of us in 1900 here in Newark. 19th century, the industrialization and growth was a man named Seth Boyd, and that's where the project comes from. Who came here and invented tanning leather. He made leather goods and became rich. That canal, Morris Canal, we developed the shipping industry that became big. German migration brought those breweries like Kruger's and Budweiser into Newark, were still here. Mutual Benefit came in 1845. Prudential won't pay their taxes, even today. In 1870. They haven't paid no taxes since 1970. They don't pay no taxes on the arena. They don't pay their rent on the arena. I'm trying to figure out how you can do that. You know? Why close all libraries and you won't get the money that these people owe? We were always faced with the worst health care, discriminated against in all areas of employment. Most black men worked as laborers, teamsters, expressmen, delivery men, porters, janitors, servants. Black women worked as laundresses and servants.